And with that, I am going to introduce our panelists for today. So many of you have probably met Lindsay before. Lindsay Clark is the Chief Borrower Advocate at Savi. She's a fierce champion for student loan borrowers, and she's been on our webinar several times and always does an amazing job explaining complicated information. And so with that, I'm just going to hand it right over to Lindsay. Take it away, Lindsay.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellie and Ebony and Miss Ivy and Bruce. It's wonderful to be back on this webinar again. And to many of you, I see some familiar names out there, so it's great to see you all again. As Ellie mentioned, my name is Lindsay Clark, and I'm the Chief Borrower Advocate here at Savi, and here to talk to you about student loan debt today. More specifically, some of the new programs that have come about in the last couple of years and that are going to be introduced in the coming months that can have a really big impact on anyone with student loan debt. So I'm first just going to briefly introduce, who we are at Savi, to give you a little bit of background on why we do what we do. And then I'm going to talk about two major sort of student loan debt programs: the new SAVE plan, which is a new type of income-driven repayment plan that was introduced by the Biden administration last year, and then something called account adjustments. This is a one-time program that has been in effect, but is really going to go into effect in the coming months, that it will hopefully benefit every single student loan borrower, at least those with federal student loans. So I'm going to explain to you sort of what these programs are and how borrowers might be able to benefit. And then I'm going to wrap things up by showing you how you all and potentially those that you're working with can utilize the Savi platform and tools to be able to assist student loan borrowers in navigating through these programs. So if we can go to the next slide. So again, my name is Lindsay Clark. I'm the Chief Borrower Advocate here at Savi. I've been with Savi since the very beginning, and I lead all of our consumer education and workshops on a daily basis. I'm a student loan borrower myself. I have a little over $200,000 in student loan debt. So if that makes anyone feel better about their own situations, then mission accomplished right off the bat. But I like to say that because a lot of what we do comes from the fact that we have student loans ourselves. If we can go to the next slide. Just a bit more on who we are at Savi. We are a social impact technology startup based in Washington, D.C., and we were founded by student loan experts and advocates who had been fighting on behalf of the borrower for almost a decade. And in 2017, a big forgiveness program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness really went into effect. And we saw that about 99% of borrowers were rejected for one technicality or administrative reason or another. And so we decided to do something about it. And we developed Savi as a technology platform and a human service to help borrowers like you and like me not only better understand our student loan debt, but to successfully navigate from start to finish around some of these really complicated and overwhelming federal programs. But along the way, the goal is to make the experience of being a student loan borrower a better one. And we try to do that by identifying as much additional savings that a borrower can take advantage of as possible. So our goal really here is to be an advocate to the borrower, an intermediary, work on their behalf, really serve borrowers and not their loans is how I would describe it. We can go to the next slide. We have the pleasure of working with some incredible partners across the country, including NHRC, which we've worked with for many years. And so we offer our services as an exclusive student loan benefit because we really believe that working with a trusted messenger and a trusted partner like NHRC, we're able to reach borrowers better. And so that helps to ensure the best outcome possible for a borrower's student loans. So here are just some examples of the other organizations that we work with: AARP, NEA, the biggest teachers union, NAACP, again, to really help serve borrowers, in the settings that, maximize that benefit most. All right. So with that being said, we can go on to the next slide. We're going to dive right into the content here, the good stuff. And I'm going to first start talking about the SAVE plan. This is short for the Saving on a Valuable Education Plan. So let's talk about what it is. So Saving on a Valuable Education, or SAVE, is a new type of income-driven repayment plan offered by the Department of Education. It came out in August of last year, 2023. Now, just to back up and give quick context here, income-driven repayment is a type of repayment on your federal student loans that bases your monthly payment not on your debt amount, but on your income and your family size. So you could have $500,000 in student loan debt, let's say, right? But if you're making under $30,000 a year, you can qualify for a $0 monthly payment. All right, so it has nothing to do with how much student loan debt you have. It has everything to do with your income and other factors like family size and tax filing status. Now, this new SAVE plan that was introduced is the most affordable repayment plan for most borrowers. And again, it's going to set your payment amount based on your income and your family size. Now, an important thing to note is that this new SAVE plan basically replaces the existing REPAY plan. REPAY, which stands for Revised Pay as You Earn, was one type of income-driven repayment plan that had existed. And this new SAVE plan is replacing it. So borrowers that were previously enrolled in REPAY were actually automatically moved over to the SAVE plan, and their payments were recalculated accordingly. Now, this new SAVE plan is available to any borrower with direct loans. However, there's a caveat here. Parent Plus loan borrowers are not eligible for the SAVE plan, unfortunately. We're doing a lot of work with our advocacy partners to try and push on having Parent Plus loans included in future regulations, because we know that Parent Plus loans, that's an increasingly large group of student loan borrowers. It's parents taking out loans for their kids. And so this is something, hopefully we can push on the administration to include in future rounds of improvements. But as of right now, Parent Plus loans are not eligible to enroll in SAVE. The only type of income-driven repayment plan a Parent Plus loan is eligible to enroll in is the income contingent repayment, or ICR. Now, this SAVE plan is PSLF eligible, just like all of the other income-driven repayment plans. PSLF meaning Public Service Loan Forgiveness. So for any borrower who's working for a qualifying nonprofit organization and is pursuing public service loan forgiveness to have the remainder of their loan balance forgiven under that program, enrolling in SAVE will qualify them for that program as well. All right, if we can go on to the next slide. And any questions, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A or the chat. I know we're going to take time at the end. I'll be on till 3 to make sure that we can answer any of those remaining questions. All right, so what exactly are some of the benefits of this new SAVE plan? Well, this is a big one, especially, I'm speaking personally here, for borrowers who feel like their balances have only increased over the years despite making payments. And usually that's been a result of something called capitalized interest, where any unpaid interest at the end of each month and year is tacked onto their principal balance. And it makes it nearly impossible for people to try to pay down that debt. Well, on this new SAVE plan, any unpaid interest is covered by the Department of Education at the end of each month. So that prevents loan balances from ballooning. So just as an example, if you accumulate $100 of interest each month and you make a payment of only about $50, that remaining $50 will basically be subsidized by the Department of Education. It will not be added to your balance. So this is a big one. And again, this is only available to borrowers who are enrolled in that new SAVE plan. Another benefit is that it's changing how payments are being calculated to hopefully lower the monthly payment across the board for most borrowers. So the way that this works is the SAVE plan actually raises the amount of income considered non-discretionary so that no borrower making under 225% of the poverty level will have a student loan payment. All right, so that basically comes out to no one earning less than about $15 an hour will have a payment on Save. That payment will be $0. Borrowers earning more than $15 will see reduced payments as well. So there's no payment, or I should say income cap, on this Save plan. It just means that borrowers under a certain amount will really be able to benefit and qualify for a $0 payment. But across the board, raising the amount of income considered non-discretionary, it allows for a lowering of monthly payments. All right, we can keep on going here to the next slide. Great. So just sort of an example scenario of how this Save plan, could work. So let's say Sam here makes about $38,000 a year. By enrolling in the Save plan, Sam could see a savings of about $91 per month. So Sam's original payment on the repay income-driven repayment plan was $134. Now on the Save plan, that's lowered to $43 a month. And you can sort of see over here on the right is a chart that basically tracks, income, all right, on that y-axis, and family size on that x-axis. And essentially, you can see how the higher your family size, that also helps to reduce that monthly payment. And then any increase in income, right, you're seeing that increase, in monthly payment. Now, just because this chart stops at 60K does not mean that that is the income cap for the program. We have borrowers who might be making close to $100,000 who are still benefiting from enrolling into Save. All right, if we can move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about another aspect of Save that just started rolling out. So starting February 1 of this year, borrowers with original principal balances of $12,000 or less will be eligible for forgiveness after 10 years of payments. Okay. Now, for each additional $1,000 borrowed, 1 year will be added to this forgiveness timeline. I know this is getting a little technical here, but for example, let's say you borrowed $13,000, then that equals 11 years in which you can get forgiveness. Or if you borrowed $14,000, that comes out to 12 years, right? So you're adding an additional year for each $1,000 borrowed. The maximum timeline to forgiveness under this new Save plan is 20 years for only undergraduate loans and 25 years if any loans are graduate loans. Now, this is compared to the other income-driven repayment plans that are mostly on a 25-year forgiveness timeline. So after 25 years worth of payments, you're eligible to have those loans forgiven. Under this new Save plan, they've basically expedited that process for borrowers with a balance under a certain amount. Now, you might have heard in the news yesterday, President Biden came out with an announcement that they are going to be forgiving or canceling out the debt for about 140,000 borrowers with these balances under 12,000. This is what they were referring to. This wasn't supposed to go into effect until July, but they moved up that timeline so that this could start in February. So borrowers who are eligible and who are enrolled in Save, that's the most important one. They need to make sure that they enroll in Save. We'll start to see that forgiveness. We can go to the next slide. And this is going to show you a forgiveness timeline that essentially mapped out what I was talking about before, where each additional $1,000 beyond that $12,000 balance, right? You'll see a 1-year increase in that forgiveness. And again, that blue line is undergraduate. All right, so that's going to cap off at 20 years. And then that green line is graduate loans, and that'll cap off at 25 years. So the most time you'd have to spend in the repayment plan if you only had undergraduate loans would be 20 years. But again, if you had balances under that certain amount, you could qualify for forgiveness in less time. All right, now there are still more benefits coming soon. If we can go on to the next slide. So in July of this year, 2024, the final regulations around the Save plan will take effect that are going to further lower monthly payments. And here's what's going to happen. So borrowers with only undergraduate loans, come July of 2024, will then pay 5% of their discretionary income instead of the standard 10%. So right now, under the current plan, under the current Save plan, borrowers are paying 10% of their discretionary income. Come July, if for undergraduate loans, they will pay 5%. Now, borrowers with only graduate loans will continue to pay the 10% of their discretionary income. And borrowers with a combination of both graduate and undergraduate loans will pay between 5 and 10% of their discretionary income based on sort of the combined weighted average of their loan types and balances. All right. So again, come July, borrowers who are enrolled in SAVE should see an additional sort of lowering of their monthly payment, especially if they have only undergraduate loans. So further benefits that are going into effect come July. All right, so on this next slide, I'm going to show you just, and this is a preview because we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later on, but with the Savi tool and resources, by entering in some basic information, we are actually able to show a student loan borrower what their savings could be on this new SAVE plan. So you'll see here, someone could see what their new monthly payment would be on SAVE, that total payment over time, how long down to the year and month until they'd be eligible for forgiveness, and how much in forgiveness they'd be eligible to receive. And by clicking continue, they can actually enroll in that SAVE plan straight through their Savi account. So just wanted to preview how we've incorporated these new SAVE benefits and adjustments into our Savi platform, which is available for you all to use and benefit from. And we'll walk through that a little bit later on. Okay, I know that was a lot. And before I go forward onto the account adjustments, Ellie, do you think, I'm not sure if any questions have come through that might be helpful for me to answer now, or would you like me to wait until the end?
Well, there's a couple of questions specifically about the Parent Plus loan, so maybe I'll just shoot those at you to look at to answer those quick.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm working at a not-for-profit with a Parent Plus loan. Any chance that counts?
Yes. So if you have a Parent Plus loan and you, the parent, right, are the one working for a qualifying employer like a nonprofit, that can qualify for public service loan forgiveness. All that you need to do is to consolidate that Parent Plus loan into what's called a direct consolidation loan. The Savi tool can actually help to flag this for you and take those steps. Consolidation should not be confused with refinancing. Consolidation is essentially creating a new direct consolidation loan through the federal system. So it's not lowering that interest rate or anything like that, but it basically is making that loan type eligible for forgiveness. And the great thing is, because of some recent changes in the public service loan forgiveness program, what happened in the prior years when you consolidated was you basically started back at zero. Any work history or payments that you'd made on that loan didn't count. Well, now they do. So I would highly encourage you to consolidate that loan, and then you're able to get credit for, those past years of work history towards forgiveness.
Okay, and the other Parent Plus loan question is, has Savi done any double consolidations to make them eligible for other IDR options, including SAVE?
Yes. So this is the NPR article that went around the world faster than I've ever seen before. So yes, we are familiar with a double consolidation process. We have performed it with a couple borrowers. It's a very complicated and technical process, and I won't go into the details today, but our support and experts can help anyone who is interested in pursuing that. It's essentially a loophole that's going to be available through July of 2025. While the Department of Education hasn't put out any formal guidance on it, we've spoken with representatives from the Department of Ed who have confirmed this is possible. We've seen a few borrowers who have been able to do it successfully. We have a help center article on it as well in our help center. So yes, that is something that is possible and that could make you eligible to enroll in the SAVE plan. But you really have to be in a sort of a specific situation and not have consolidated yet before. So we can absolutely help anyone with that if they reach out separately.
Okay, so just a couple of things to say before you start up again, Lindsay. I want to remind everybody, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Then they'll get lost in the chat, and I don't want to miss anybody's questions. You all always ask the best questions, and I don't want to miss any of them. So make sure you put it in the Q&A box. And then the other thing that I will say is anybody who's interested in accessing Savi to help with all of these things, they do have some free services that you can use. But also, as a housing counseling agency, earlier Miss Ivy put a link in to Savi for NHRC folks. And that is for housing counseling agencies to get a bit of a discount to utilize the service. If you're a member, there's a whole different link, which we won't share here, that is an even deeper discount. So, Ms. Ivy, if you could pop that link back into the chat again so that people see it. It's just a way for you to look at the possibility of utilizing Savi's direct assistance with a little bit of a discount. And thank you. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Great. Thanks so much, Ellie. All right, we'll continue right along here. So now if we can go to the next slide, we're going to talk about one-time account adjustments. And again, this is something that is going to impact every single borrower with federal student loans. So let's dive in and talk about what it is exactly. So this is a one-time initiative by the Department of Education to basically address historical failures in administering student loans. And what it's geared towards is providing credit. And by credit, I mean credit as if a borrower had made a payment that month towards income-driven repayment forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness. All right, and we'll go into more detail in just a few seconds here. But all to say that this adjustment is currently underway. It began in the fall of last year. And the Department of Education is basically notifying borrowers who are eligible for relief now. They get a letter basically stating their loans have been, fully forgiven, and they're able to receive that forgiveness automatically. For everyone else, let's say who doesn't qualify right now for immediate full forgiveness, the Department of Education expects to complete the full adjustment for all borrowers by July 1 of this year. And they estimate that after they've completed that adjustment, borrowers will receive at least 3 years of additional credit towards loan forgiveness, whether that be income-driven repayment forgiveness or public service loan forgiveness. And many, again, will see their loans forgiven entirely as a result. Just to give you a sense of the impact of this, since this past summer, the Department of Education has approved almost $44 billion in debt relief for more than 90,000 borrowers. And these were mostly borrowers who had had their loans for 20 plus years. So these were a lot of older borrowers who were in desperate need of this type of forgiveness. But again, these account adjustments are going to occur for every single federal student loan borrower. So someone who could be, 8 years into repaying their loan, right? And we'll see an increase in their credit count towards forgiveness, again, either under income-driven repayment forgiveness, or if they're eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So on this next slide, we're going to dive into some of the details around exactly what this account adjustment does. So specifically, these sort of one-time improvements or adjustments will adjust a borrower's account by awarding payment credit for the following. First, any month in repayment, regardless of whether payments were partial or late, the loan type they might have had, or the repayment plan. So maybe they weren't on an income-driven repayment plan during that month. Maybe they were on an extended graduate or extended plan or graduate plan or standard plan. If they made a payment, that is going to count towards the time needed to see forgiveness again under an income-driven repayment plan, or if they're eligible, public service loan forgiveness. On top of that, they're going to receive credit for months spent in consecutive forbearance, specifically at least 12 months of consecutive forbearance. Now, I know I myself personally, and a lot of borrowers, when they weren't able to afford their monthly payment, a lot of times when they called their servicers for help, they were pushed into a forbearance instead of perhaps into an income-driven repayment plan. And so many borrowers used lots and lots of months of forbearance where essentially their payments were paused, but they were still accumulating interest. Well, now, for any months, at least 12 consecutive months spent in forbearance, a borrower is able to receive payment credit for those months as if they had made payments. In addition to that, months while a borrower spent at least 36 cumulative months in forbearance, okay? So whether it's 12 months consecutive or 36 cumulative months, they are able to receive payment credit for those months as well. In addition, any month spent in deferment, with the exception of in-school deferment, those periods don't count. But any month spent in deferment prior to 2013 will count as payment credit as part of these adjustments. All right. And on top of that, any month in which loans were in an eligible repayment, deferment, or forbearance status prior to a consolidation. So I had just mentioned in answering one of those questions, right, that often before a lot of these improvements went into effect, when borrowers consolidated, they basically started back at zero. That won't be the case here. They will get credit for any months before that consolidation as well. All right, so that sort of outlines exactly what borrowers can expect that they might get credit for. Now, let's talk about on this next slide, what are the required steps in order to benefit from this account adjustment? So in order to receive the credit, all right, your federal loans must be either direct federal loans or FFEL loans, FFEL loans, which stands for Federal Family Education Loans that are managed by the Department of Education. Now, if you have commercially held FFEL loans or Perkins loans or HEAL loans, you will need to consolidate your loans, okay, in order to qualify for this account adjustment. Now, these commercially held FFEL, Perkins, and HEAL loans are the older types of loans that no longer are being issued. And so these are the loans and borrowers who would probably benefit most from this account adjustment and could potentially see their entire loan balance forgiven entirely. But they need to make sure they consolidate before April 30th of this year in order to be included in this account adjustment. Okay. Now, if you have a direct loan or you have a FFEL loan that's managed by the Department of Education, you're all set to go. And this account adjustment will happen automatically. Okay. You won't need to do anything for this to be applied to your account. But if you have one of these commercially held FFEL loans, Perkins, or HEAL loans, you will need to consolidate before April 30th to qualify. If you don't consolidate by that date, you will not receive the account adjustment. And like I said, those borrowers who need to consolidate are probably the group that can benefit most from this account adjustment. I mean, it could be the difference between literally having your loan balance completely wiped out and not. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of that April 30th deadline for consolidation. All right, so if we can go on to the next slide here, I know that was a lot of information. It's a lot to consume in one sitting. And while these programs can be very beneficial and helpful with the potential to forgive the entirety or remainder of someone's loan balance, they're confusing. There's constantly changes coming out. Borrowers are faced with a large number of options, repayment programs, forgiveness programs available. And many times they're left wondering, what plan is the best for me? It's almost like a paralysis. The bias for action is really hard. I can say this myself as a student loan borrower. It's very easy to procrastinate around your student loans. And a lot of people, I think, are holding out with hope that President Biden's, main forgiveness program might still be possible, right? But again, it's important that borrowers know about some of these options right now, since payments have resumed. Since there's this upcoming April 30th deadline, it's important for them to take action around certain things so that they can maximize the benefit. And so that's really exactly where Savi comes in the role that we hope to play. If we can go on to the next slide here. So I'm kind of just going to walk you through how, our services and our technology and our human service really, our one-on-one support with student loan experts like myself, can help a student loan borrower navigate through these sort of tricky programs. So as I'm about to show you, when you set up a Savi account and answer some of these questions, a borrower is able to see a personalized repayment and forgiveness plan down to the cent as to what they would be eligible for as far as repayment and any forgiveness programs. We also monitor for new programs and policy changes. A lot has changed over the last couple of years. And our tool, it incorporates all of the most recent and current changes that are happening and even going forward. We handle all of the yearly recertification for repayment and forgiveness plans, all of the paperwork that needs to be submitted that can often trip borrowers up, delay their applications, et cetera. We manage all of that for a borrower. We monitor with the borrower to make sure that servicers are acting accordingly. Some of you might have heard recently in the news, there have been a lot of issues with federal servicing delays. Borrowers who received the wrong payment amounts were auto-debited for the wrong payment amounts, whose applications have taken months for their servicers to review. These are all things where Savi really can act as sort of the advocate to the borrower. And last but not least, they're able to receive sort of personalized support from student loan experts. I know that this is probably one of the most beneficial aspects, of our service is being able to talk to someone, especially given the fact that many borrowers try to call their servicer and can't get a hold of anyone. The wait times are 3-4+ hours. And even when they do, every time they call, they get a different answer. It's very hard to know who to trust. And so that's exactly where Savi comes in. So we try to make this whole process really as simple as possible for the borrower, but allow them the ability to get that trusted advice. So on this next slide here, you'll see it's really some simple steps to get started. We basically collect some basic information that's all part of one application. So as a borrower, you might need to submit a few different applications, but through Savi, it's all streamlined through one. You're able to see your options and then digitally submit those applications through our tool and start saving. So on this next slide, I'm just going to walk you through a few screenshots of sort of how the tool works. Right here is basically your Savi dashboard. You can sort of think of it like mission control for everything Savi. It's where you're going to be able to do a lot of different things and see the status of your applications and forgiveness, savings, and things like that. On this next slide, you'll see you can also invite friends and family to benefit from Savi as well. So you can simply type in their email address and they will get an email invite. Again, I think many of us know if we have student loans, we know someone with student loan debt or are related to someone with student loan debt. And this is a way for us to help as many people in the community as possible. And then to make the most of Savi, if we can go on to the next slide, there are a couple different options. So everyone can create a Savi account for free. And through that, you can answer those questions. We can show you what your best options are. You can access our online interactive help center. But if you want Savi to take on the heavy lifting and that administrative burden for you, filling out all of your paperwork, monitoring and managing that paperwork for you, ensuring you cross the finish line, that's part of our Savi Essential Plan. And it's a low yearly fee. And again, as Ellie mentioned, there's a discounted fee for any members of NHRC. And that includes access to our experts at any point in time, one-on-one, whether it be phone or email. And it includes all of the paperwork and application management involved with applying for these programs and actually reaching that finish line. Now, just to give you a sense of what's involved in creating your Savi account, if we can go on to the next slide here. So again, it almost feels like a TurboTax for your student loans, or at least that's an analogy I can use to describe it. We're going to ask you some basic questions around your family size, your income, and your employment. All of this is going to help us identify the optimal repayment and forgiveness plan for you. So again, on these income-driven repayment plans, right, those are based on your income, your tax filing status, things like that. And for your employment, that's a big determinant of your eligibility for forgiveness. And so you can add any current or previous employment you might have had into our tool. We have a database of all of the public service loan forgiveness eligible employers in the country, and you can easily add that information there, and that factors into our calculation. And then on this next slide here, you'll see the last step in the process is just syncing your student loans. So we provide a loan sync through a secure technology called Plaid. If you have a Venmo account, you've used Plaid before. What it allows you to do is to select your servicer. So let's say Navient in this case, enter in your Navient username and password credentials, and it's going to sync over a read-only snapshot of that loan data, which basically allows us to refine our estimates around what your best eligibility is going to be. It also allows us to flag if you have a loan type that requires consolidation in order to be eligible for some of these programs. So for example, let's say you have a Parent Plus loan and you go through that loan sync. We're actually going to flag for you, you're going to need to consolidate this loan in order to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Or maybe you have one of those older commercially held FFEL loans and you're not sure if you do. When you go through the process in sync, we're going to be able to detect that and instruct you further on how to consolidate that loan so that you can benefit from things like the account adjustment. And then once you sync those loans, on this next slide here, you'll see this is the final step, your plan options page, where we basically show you what your best options would be. So you'll see what that new monthly payment could look like, that total payment over time. Again, how long until you'd be eligible for forgiveness, and exactly how much in forgiveness you'd be eligible to receive. We might find a couple of different eligible plan options for you based on your situation. Again, this is completely personalized to you, the borrower. And it's at this point where the next steps are going to be enrolling in these programs. So that might require enrolling in an income-driven repayment plan, which in this case, it might be SAVE, or it might require enrolling in public service loan forgiveness as well. And that's a whole separate application process. So this is where that essential plan really comes into play, where we take on all that administrative burden. So if we go on to the next slide here, you'll see how basically with a click of a button, someone on the left-hand side has 3 separate public service loan forgiveness employers. They're able to, with that click, create that digital form. It gets signed by the borrower, and then we actually send it off to their employer for signature. And then we submit it to the servicer on their behalf. So there's no printing out forms, driving to get signed off by your former employer, then submitting it on your own via fax. We do all of this in our system for you. We also digitally handle the income-driven repayment application. You can do it literally from your phone through our DocuSign. You're able to sign off, attach your income documentation, and then that gets submitted on your behalf through our digital fax system to ensure it gets there, quickly, accurately, and efficiently. And then on this next slide, you'll see that once submitted or in the process, we actually monitor those applications, because there might be several, to ensure that they reach the desired finish line. So you'll see on the left here, this is someone with 3 different forgiveness applications in progress for their public service loan forgiveness, 3 different employers that they need to get certification from, as well as their income-driven repayment application. And then on the right here, we've zoomed in, and they can see exactly where they are in that process, because there are many touch points, and it's not a short one. This can sometimes take multiple months for these servicers to review these applications, and borrowers are often left wondering where they are, what's going on. And so they can see exactly what's been submitted on their behalf, estimated wait times, what we still need from them to basically help track their touch points every step of the way. And then last but not least, on this next slide, if they need assistance at any point, they can access our customer support team. So they can always access our help center, regardless of whether they choose that essential plan or not. But they can send a message to our support team right through their Savi account. They'll have a dedicated Savi agent that works with them through the entirety of their application process. So they're not having to re-explain things to someone else, et cetera. This person knows exactly what their situation is. And they can contact support again through via phone or through their account really easily. So to wrap things up here and sort of what's next, I know Ms. Ivy and Ebony have been putting some links in the chat, but it's really easy to create that Savi account, enter in that information. And then again, if you or anyone you're working with is interested in getting that personalized one-on-one support or having their applications fully taken care of, they can upgrade to that essential by clicking contact support, and we'll be able to help them from there. So that's just sort of a look at how you all can benefit from the Savi tools and resources, and happy to answer any questions from here.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. That was really great. Lots of information. One of the things that I want to point to before we get to the questions, Ms. Ivy's going to put into the chat a couple of documents that were published by the Consumers for Responsible Lending. One of them is about the SAVE program and how much it can help people, and another one is related to how the government entities account for student loan debt when they're doing mortgages, and and some suggestions that they have for that. So Ms. Ivy's popping that into the chat so you can take a look at those. So I'm going to start with the questions. And the very first question is actually for Bruce. And this is about the Section 8 homeownership voucher. You mentioned that it could be used to purchase a home. We don't have a lender in Utah that uses that income to qualify for a loan. The Section 8 voucher is only for rent, and they'll lose the voucher if they purchase. Maybe I am wrong.
Well, there are some complexities to the program. So the first thing is you need to have a public housing authority in your area that offers the program. You could email me directly and I can look up if they're currently offering the program, if they're eligible to offer the program, but then they also need to promote it. So it's really a lot up to the housing authority. On the lender side, we could probably figure out if there's a lender that can help you out. But the bigger issue is you need to find, you need to make sure that the housing authority is actually providing the program. And one of the things we're doing is advocating with some of the housing authorities that aren't currently that they can get on board. But yeah, if you'd email me and include what organization you're in and which city you're in, I'm happy to look you up.
And I put Bruce's email address in the chat. If someone is in the SAVE plan, but are still seeing interest charges or principal increases, what should they do?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I would say because of a lot of the servicer errors and delays that have been going on, and the Department of Education actually called out Mokilas explicitly in this at the end of last year, and they're trying to enforce some measures to protect borrowers here, but we're seeing this happen a lot. My suggestion would be this. If you're not able to reach your servicer directly to inquire about these, which is often the case these days because of the wait times, we've had success in submitting complaints through the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They have oversight and have been very active in holding servicers accountable. And so this is an online, I'll try to find the link for you right now. I can put it in the chat as well. It's an online portal where you can basically submit a description of your complaint and some documentation. And what that does is it triggers a review process that requires the servicer to respond within 15 days to your complaint. This also helps the CFPB to go after servicers in a way that holds them more accountable. But that shouldn't be happening under the new SAVE plan. And so this is something that Savi can help you with. But again, if you want to do this on your own, I'd suggest submitting a complaint to the CFPB.
Okay. Does the spouse's income have to count as income, or is it just the borrower?
So it depends on your tax filing status. If you are married filing jointly, the spouse's income does count. If you are married filing separately, it does not count. So that's sort of the short answer there.
Okay. Is this different and separate from the PSLF?
The SAVE plan is different from public service loan forgiveness. So the SAVE plan is a type of income-driven repayment plan. So this is purely about repayment of loans, whereas public service loan forgiveness is a forgiveness program based on your employment. However, being enrolled in the SAVE plan, as a type of income-driven repayment plan, or any of the income-driven repayment plans, those count. And that's one of the requirements of being eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So sort of combining the two can maximize that benefit. You can minimize that monthly payment on that SAVE plan with maximizing that potential forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness. So that's how the two sort of work together.
Okay, I'm going to read this question. I'm not quite sure I understand it, but maybe you do, Lindsay. So for the SAVE program, 10-year and $12,000 is for the total loans taken out?
Okay, it's not for the total. Well, actually, I should say this. Yes, it is for the total. So if you have, many borrowers have on average between 5 and 6 different loans. If each of those is under $12,000, but the total, is over 12,000, that doesn't count. Your total loan balance has to have been under $12,000 across multiple loans, if that makes sense.
Okay. So whether you have one loan or you have 50 loans, it has to be under
Exactly.
$12,000.
Yep.
Okay, got it. If someone currently has a zero payment, but works at a qualifying nonprofit, would it benefit them to try to switch to PSLF if they can get an affordable payment? So they can then work towards loan forgiveness.
Okay, this is a great question. So actually being on a $0 monthly payment, right? I'm assuming on an income-driven repayment plan, that actually qualifies. Each month that you are making a $0 payment counts as a qualifying payment month towards public service loan forgiveness. And how public service loan forgiveness works is you just need 120 total qualifying payment months to have the remainder of your loan balance forgiven. So I'll give you an example. The 3+ years during which payments were paused, right? If you were a borrower that took advantage of that payment pause and had your payments paused, which happened automatically, and let's say you were working for a qualifying nonprofit employer during that time, you get credit for those 3+ years. I believe it's like 40+ actual credits towards the 120 total that you need. So actually being in that $0 monthly repayment plan right now, that's great because you're paying nothing, but each month you're getting closer and closer to public service loan forgiveness. So just want to reiterate that, your repayment plan and public service loan forgiveness are different. In order for a month to count as a qualifying credit towards public service loan forgiveness, you need to be on an income-driven repayment plan. And if you're paying $0 on that income-driven repayment plan, that's perfect. That's great because each one of those months is going to count. Okay. So that's actually sort of the ideal scenario. Now you're already on that income-driven repayment plan. What you need to do to sort of get on public service loan forgiveness is to just submit what's called the PSLF employment certification form. This is the one and only form for the program. And if you've had multiple employers over the years, anything going back to 2007 counts. That's when the program started. So it's completely retroactive. So if you've worked for 4 different nonprofits during that time, you'd need to submit 4 different forms. Basically, it gets signed off by you, the borrower, and then it gets signed off by the employer. And then it needs to get submitted to MOHELA Servicing. MOHELA is the sole servicer in charge of public service loan forgiveness. They'll review it and they'll say, okay, great, Lindsay, so far based on, your repayment history and your work history, you have 90 credits towards the 120. You're like, okay, great. Then in a year from now, or we recommend every 12 months, you'll submit another one of those PSLF employment certification forms for your employer, basically to bring you current. And they will basically certify the past 12 months of payments, inching you closer and closer to 120. Some borrowers wait until they think they've hit the 120 to submit those forms. I highly discourage that because it leaves more room for error on the servicer side and it takes a lot longer. I would encourage you, regardless of where you think you might be towards that 120, to get those submitted now. And then again, you could see a huge benefit or bump once that account adjustment happens, in the coming months that gets you even closer to the 120. So absolutely, there's nothing you need to do for the borrower that asked that question right now, except for perhaps submit those PSLF forms. But being on a $0 repayment plan is perfect.
Okay. We have an employee that also works part-time for a for-profit. Would they still qualify for forgiveness if otherwise qualified?
Yep. So if we're looking at forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness, the only technicality here is that you have to work a minimum of 30 hours or more at that qualifying employer. So if you work 30 hours or more on average, okay, maybe some weeks are less, maybe some weeks are more, but on average, 30 hours, then you can qualify just based on what might be considered that part-time work. But if your other job is for a for-profit, that those hours wouldn't count. So you just need to make sure that the work that you're doing for the qualifying employer is on average 30 hours or more a week.
Okay. Oh, and I want to point out, I did put the link in the chat to the CFPB complaint portal.
Oh, thank you, Ellie.
Yep, for folks who want to do that. So if consolidated, undergrad and graduate loans can all have the same payment count for PSLF, even if grad loans weren't even taken out when undergrad payments were made, Sounds
Yes.
too good to be true.
Yes, so yes, but that is ending. Starting July 1, that will not be the case. It will be a weighted average. So if you, and this is a situation where someone by consolidating could really benefit. I just took advantage of this myself because I had undergrad loans from 2011 and graduate loans from 2018. That by consolidating, again, this is limited time, consolidating now, you will be able to receive credit from basically the oldest credit count, the oldest loan type that you have. Starting July, it will be a sort of a weighted average. So now is the time to consolidate if you have different loan types.
Okay. We have clients that have signed up for PSLF, are almost at their 10-year mark of some loans under a repayment plan based on income. However, they acquire more loans with later due dates. Should they consolidate loans and sign up for SAVE? Will this update due date to original PSLF date for forgiveness?
Yeah, so if they consolidate, they won't be set back as far as when they'd be forgiveness eligible. So they absolutely should. If those loans have gone into repayment, those newer loans, because that's the one key factor here, they need to be sort of in repayment status. Then they should consolidate them, and then they will all be able to reach the same credit count towards that public service loan forgiveness, if that's what they're sort of pursuing.
Okay. I'm going to ask kind of two questions because they're very related. We got this one question through email, but how does this appear on a credit report once the loan is forgiven? That's one question. And then are there tax implications to the forgiveness?
Yeah, so I'll take the second part of that first. So as far as tax implications, there are no federal tax implications here under public service loan forgiveness. However, there may be state related tax implications. And I know that varies state by state. So I believe that there are resources on the Department of Education website about how those might apply. As far as appearing on a credit report, so usually we've been tracking, a few different borrowers around how their credit reports are appearing post forgiveness. That loan will basically show a $0 balance. And so it will be, depending upon, how quickly it's updated, it will show as though you don't have that loan anymore, essentially. So I'm not a credit report expert and not exactly sure what implications that would have right away. But that's essentially how it works. Now we've seen with some borrowers where there's a temporary, almost negative impact because it's showing that they have less credit basically than they had before, right? So it's I know how with credit reporting, right, where if you have an outstanding debt, you're making payments towards that debt, that can be a positive sign on your credit report rather than it just being removed entirely. But then that ends up getting outweighed once that balance is zero. So that's essentially how it should work. But I know the CFPB has come out with some great reporting on this as well, because we've seen some issues with how servicers are reporting to the Federal Credit Bureau. So anyway, that's sort of hopefully a long and short of it, but it should appear as a $0 balance on your credit report.
Okay. If a borrower has a loan in default and wants to consolidate by the April 30th deadline, are they also eligible to participate in the Fresh Start program? And if so, in what order does this need to be done?
Yes, so great question. First, they should do Fresh Start. And that essentially needs to be done over the phone. They need to call the collection agency and verbally initiate, I'd like to enroll in Fresh Start. That takes about a month for that to process. And then once that loan is back in good standing, they should consolidate that loan. So Fresh Start first to get it out of default, and then they should consolidate.
Okay. So tell us, Lindsay, what is the full cost for somebody to use Savi without talking about our discounts? What is the full cost for somebody to use Savi?
Yeah, so the full cost is $60 a year for that essential service. So again, you can create your account completely for free, enter in information, see what your best options are. You essentially get to that plan results page. But for us to do all the applications and the paperwork, monitoring, and that one-on-one support, that is that $60 a year fee. And there's no sort of recurring, you get to decide year over year whether you want to enroll in that essential again. And it's 100% money back guarantee. So if you try it and you said, oh, it's not as valuable as I think it was, or I'm not eligible or something like that, then we give you a refund. No questions asked.
Okay. So that's we have it listed that it's $60 per person if they use that nhrcbysavi.com link. And thought that was a discount, but it sounds like it is the full price.
You know what, Ellie, I can double check on that.
Okay.
You might be right, but I will double check.
Okay. And I do know that, and then members get an even deeper discount that it's $50 per person per year in this same way. And that link is only available to members in good standing, and you'll need to, any member in good standing that doesn't have it would need to reach out directly to Ebony Cartwright. And I popped her email into the chat box a couple of different times. So
we're referring to, it's normally for sort of non-NHRC community, whether it's it's normally $90 a year. So that's
okay.
$60 reflective of a discount for the NHRC broader community, and obviously a discount for members.
Great. So it's a $30 discount for the housing counseling industry overall, and it is a $40 discount for members. So thank you. Do you know how the current forced admin forbearance borrowers are being placed in is going to be handled for PSLF?
Yes, good question. So just to give some context here, because of the processing delays that many servicers were experiencing around, especially, income-driven repayment applications, what they were doing was they were putting, as soon as a borrower would submit that application, they'd put them into an administrative forbearance, where essentially they weren't responsible for making a payment that month. And these forbearances lasted potentially a couple months while the servicer was, processing their application. Now, the servicers are supposed to count those months in which a borrower was placed in the sort of forced administrative forbearance as qualifying payment credit months towards public service loan forgiveness. Now, whether this is actually happening in reality is another question. We've had to work with several borrowers and going back and forth with MOHELA to have those months count, but the ruling is that they absolutely should count. That's been stated by the Department of Education and others. So they absolutely should count. And it might be more of a matter of sort of going back and forth with the Department of, or I should say MOHELA or your servicer, just to make sure that happens. And that's exactly where sort of Savi can come in, because we deal with this all the time. But those months absolutely should count.
Okay, I think you addressed this a little bit as part of another question, but what if the loan has been in default?
Yeah, so if a loan has been in default, a borrower should absolutely take advantage of something called the Fresh Start program. This began last year and it runs through the end of this year. And it is essentially a way to get out of default quick without having to go through the typical rehabilitation process, which can normally take 9 months. And so what this Fresh Start does, and unfortunately there's no sort of online application here, it has to be done via phone call, but it allows a borrower to basically bring their loan back into good standing automatically and become eligible for any of these repayment or forgiveness programs. They simply need to call the collection agency that currently owns their loan in default. And that process takes once initiated, takes about a month to complete.
Okay. Not sure if this was answered. I don't think it was. How is discretionary income defined? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so discretionary income is basically looking at your adjusted gross income, or your AGI. So that's going to be before taxes. We all know it would be a lot lower after taxes, but it's going to be before taxes. And so if you are married filing jointly, that's looking at the joint income of both spouses. If you are a single borrower, it's just looking at yours alone. And if you are married filing separately, it is looking also just at your individual income. So if you're looking at your tax return, I believe it's line 5, 6, or 7 that I think that AGI is listed. That's what you can basically estimate that they're going to use for your discretionary income. Now, another thing that most borrowers don't know, when you are applying for an income-driven repayment plan, you can use two forms of supporting documentation. If you can either use your most recent tax return, or you can use a pay stub from the last 90 days. The reason I mention this is because for a lot of, let's say, hourly workers, or maybe some months they get overtime and others it's a lot less. If they're able to select a pay stub from the last 90 days in which it's a lot lower, appearing on that pay stub, right? And this is completely above board and allowed. What the Department of Ed does is they use that number and they extrapolate it out over the year as their yearly income. And so it's possible for a borrower to basically have a lower yearly income rate based on that pay stub than they might have in their tax return. So I, oftentimes in working with people whose, income varies, right? It goes up and down. I alert them to this so that they can be aware of perhaps when they'd want to submit that application. And the other thing to note too is that you can submit an income-driven repayment application as many times during the year as possible, or as you need to have your repayment recalculated. So let's say your income decreases a lot, next month. Resubmit that income-driven repayment application noting that newer income, and they will recalculate your monthly payment, and that locks that in for 12 months. You're not required to recertify for 12 months. So even if your income were to go back up, you're still locked in on that lower monthly payment amount. So just a good tip there.
Okay. If I have FFEL loans and did not consolidate when I had a chance last year by the end of September, but I have been working for a nonprofit for about 6 years, should I consolidate now? Will the clock start from when I consolidate?
You should absolutely consolidate now. Don't worry about missing that September deadline. You should absolutely consolidate now, and it won't start from when you consolidate. It will go back to the original origination date of the loan. So you will be able to get credit for those 6 years, and you should absolutely consolidate now.
Okay. If you want to go back to school to finish a BA, will this interrupt any student debt consolidation and forgiveness?
No, it won't. But I would say this, if you're going back to school, one of the things that will often happen if you have existing student loans is they will automatically put you into an in-school deferment status. And that status, you are not eligible to continue receiving qualifying payment credit for towards public service loan forgiveness. So let's say you're going back to school and you're continuing to work full time, maybe for a qualifying employer, right? If you're in that in-school deferment status, none of that time will count. So what you can do, if this is possible given your situation, is try to get on an income-driven repayment plan to really minimize that monthly payment. And if it's affordable for you to keep making payments while you're in school, you're going to need to call your servicer directly. This is the only way to do it, and say, I'd like to be taken off of income, the in-school deferment status. They'll place you in repayment status, and then you'll be able to continue getting payment credit for that time. I've seen so many borrowers who were placed in an in-school deferment, but continue to work full time and thinking that they were going to get credit. And you can't for that. That's the one status, that in-school deferment status, that they don't give credit for. So just want to make you aware of that.
Okay. If you have late payment for student loans due to personal hardship in the past, can you request a removal of late payment to the credit bureau?
Interesting. I have not done that. I've not encountered a borrower or done that with a borrower before or myself, but I imagine that it could be possible. Like I said, I'm not as much of an expert in navigating with the credit bureaus, but I imagine that there might be a way to be able to do that. So we can definitely look into that and maybe provide some more follow-up information, but that should seem like it might be something that could be possible.
Okay. What's the best way to consolidate? I have 2 parent loans.
Yes, the best way to consolidate is through studentaid.gov, and I'll put that link in the chat. That is the official website for the Department of Education. And what you'll need to do is log in using your federal student aid ID. This is what's given to every borrower when they take out student loans. And right on that sort of portal, you'll be able to consolidate your loans. It's sort of an online application. It takes less than 10 minutes. You can submit it from there, and then you're done. And that process to consolidate for it to complete takes anywhere between 1 to 2 months. But that is the best way. There's a paper application, but I highly discourage you from doing that. This online portal will automatically bring in the loans that need to be consolidated, walks you through each step of the process. And like I said, you can have it done in under 10 minutes.
Have there been any changes to the bankruptcy rules for student loans?
Not as of late, although that's something that I know the administration has been working on in some of its negotiated rulemaking, but nothing to report on that's new.
So just for the benefit of the folks on the call who may not know, you can't use bankruptcy to get rid of your student loan debt, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think that this is the final question. How are borrowers being notified about the program announced yesterday and about the SAVE program?
Yes. So if you are eligible to receive, immediate forgiveness and are enrolled in SAVE, you should receive a letter automatically from the Department of Education. I believe it might even look as though it's coming from President Biden himself, but that should happen automatically. But again, you need to be enrolled in SAVE to benefit from the announcement that happened yesterday.
Okay, and that's all of our questions. Are there any final things you'd like to say, Lindsay?
No, I appreciate it. These are great questions as always. And I think, we put the links around Savi in the chat, but we're here to help and really appreciate you having us on today. We love working with NHRC and supporting the community. So, please let us know how we can help further.
I am saying just one more question in the chat. See, this is what happens. If you put it in the chat, I miss it.
It's all good.
Do you do these presentations at nonprofits?
We do, yes. You can, if you'd like to set something up separately or through NHRC, you can reach out to us after the presentation, but we absolutely do. We work with hundreds of nonprofits across the country. And this is my first of 3 webinars today. So we do these a lot.
Okay. And then another question just popped into the Q&A. Can't bankruptcy help on private student loans for a portion of the loans that didn't go to the school, such as housing?
Yes, they can, but private student loans are very different than federal student loans. The private student loans are not regulated by the sort of the federal system or Department of Education. So I'm not as well versed in how those private loans would be handled through bankruptcy, but just as private loans are not eligible for any of these repayment or forgiveness programs, and are considered and handled entirely different from a federal debt. Like, for example, if you go into default on a federal debt, right, they will come after you for that debt until it's repaid. So, after there's default, there's wage garnishment, where they're taking 15% of every paycheck, right, until that debt is repaid. With private loans, those operate as sort of any other private debt where, they might get sold off to another lender, you'll go into collections, and then after 7 years, right, that gets wiped from your credit report. So they're handled differently, which is why in bankruptcy, I believe that they're handled differently as well.
Okay, see, this is what happens. Questions breed questions. So there's another one in the Q&A box. So are there any drawbacks to signing up for the SAVE program or valid reasons for hesitancy?
Not that I can think of. The only thing, and this is where, again, the Savi tool is pretty valuable in showing you what your best options are. There are some instances where, depending upon a borrower's balance and income, where some of the other income-driven repayment plans might be a better option, or you might not even be eligible, like if you have a Parent Plus loan, right, for the SAVE plan. So going through and seeing what your best option is going to be on any of the income-driven repayment plans is going to be the best bet. But I would say, for me, one of the biggest benefits of SAVE is this sort of interest subsidization, right? The fact that regardless of how little you might be paying on that loan each month, you can ensure that that balance is not going to increase. Unfortunately, it's not retroactive, but that is in place under the SAVE plan is going to prevent a lot of borrowers from being stuck with their debt for years, if not decades.
Sorry, I was on mute, speaking away. This question is kind of for us. Can we give the Savi NHRC link to our clients? Yes, you can. You can use that to help your clients utilize Savi if they are interested in using that the paid program. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce to wrap it up.
I love that last question. So when we first started this, we thought of it as a client tool because we were doing a lot of work during the student loan crisis, the early parts of the student loan crisis, and we had to encourage people to also apply it to their staffs. And you can also apply it to your family, so your family and your staff members' family too. I mean, the whole idea is to make this easily available to you, and we want to really help make it more sustainable to do our work, and dealing with student loans is part of all of that. Which leads right into joining NHRC. Ellie gave a really good intro, I thought, earlier. We are a membership supported organization, and we kind of need your support. We do things that nobody else is going to pay for. So around lobbying in Congress and lobbying with the regulators, that membership dues cover those kinds of expenses. So please support us. We're big thanks to the groups in Oklahoma who just did a meeting with us around the really working on trying to get funding through the next budget cycle and trying to maintain the funding we've got. And we just had a groups in Minnesota, a number of you who were really great in the meeting, asking for some leadership support from Senator Tina Smith in Minnesota. I mean, all those things happen. Many of you have been invited into Christie's meetings with congressional contacts, and it matters a lot that you're the local voices that we can elevate in these meetings with decision makers. And you'll get a discount going to the our conference. We really do want to make it work for people. There's of course the credit report discount. We've been mentioning repeatedly about Savi's online student loan service. It's really a terrific program. You also get unusual notices about funding that might be a little bit out of the mainstream. Some of these are the big challenge grants for a lot of money. And we are trying to get housing counseling to be part of hopefully some big winners on this at some time in the future. But the real thing is that you're supporting our work and you work together. And that's kind of what we exist for. So we're always very interested if you got some ideas about what NHRC should be doing. That's very helpful to us. And some of the work we've been doing has been stuff that's come through the ranks. So we appreciate all of that. So with that quick note, I know we have a bunch of webinars coming up. So we'll shoot out with the recording. I'm sure there'll be a notice of what the upcoming webinars are, but I think they're all going to be kind of the cutting edge piece of our work, or state of the art opportunities. So great, thank you everybody.
There's one more thing that kind of came through, and I think this is a pertinent question, and I kind of typed an answer, but I wanted everybody else to hear it. Somebody asked about should we be offering more than one option than Savi, just like we have to do with lenders. And from my understanding, there isn't anybody else like Savi. They're the only ones that are doing this kind of direct service work. That's one thing. The other thing is Savi offers a free option. So folks don't have to pay to go into Savi and get information through their website about what's available to them. The paid portion is to get that kind of individualized service from a Savi staff member to help fill out paperwork, to help negotiate and navigate the whole Department of Education and servicer issues. So I don't believe that there's any kind of requirement that you provide three options in this particular scenario.
Yeah, and we did look around and ask around. We tried to do a little bit of vetting on these. So when this first became an opportunity, we have very close friends with a number of advocacy organizations that work in this field, and Savi was really the only one that they would want to put their name on. So, but thanks for that question. It's a fair one. We don't mind those kinds of things. keep asking us. We may learn some things. Good. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you at the next webinar.